We're taking a look at Silent Hill Alchemilla, a fan project made in the Source engine that attempts to capture the feeling of Silent Hill. Did it succeed in doing this? Is it a fun game as a whole? I will answer every question regarding this mod, summarize, analyze and review it, and try to interpret its very dark story. The game starts off without much of an intro, which the character we play as reflects.
What happened? What am I doing here?
We find a note on the table. This is the last day I spent in my old room. Too many bad memories hold up in here. Tomorrow I'll be in Ashfield. I don't want to sell the house, don't want strangers living in it. I keep having this feeling like I'm going to leave something important here, like I'm forgetting something. Ashfield is a real town that exists in Silent Hill. Referencing real timeline events and locations is something this mod will continue to do in its attempt to fit into the Silent Hill lore. However successfully that can be done in the messed up timeline Silent Hill and its games have. It's our house we are in. The ambient music is incredibly beautiful and calming. Even though I knew I was getting into a horror game, the music signaled that this is not a place to worry. Just like the Silent Hill games do it as well, interacting with objects often gives you a small text regarding them. This can either be simple world building, or it can be used as hints. For example, telling you that a door is broken or merely locked, in which case you'll know that you have to find a key to open it. Entering the garden is where the intro ends, as a loud alarm sounds. This exact alarm can often be heard in the Silent Hill games and signifies a jump to the other world. A world we will have to deal with a lot in this game. What exactly the other world is remains unknown. Why this siren is relevant to this story exactly can only be theorized about, and I will do so later. As you can see from the background footage, we get taken to the other world in the form of a cutscene, in which the camera floats through a rusty looking hospital. We awake back in the normal world. The protagonist is still unaware of what's happening.
What the hell is this place?
The character will continue to find out what's going on as we are. A really good decision that both immerses you further and also makes you care for the character. We are in Alchemilla Hospital, an important location from the Silent Hill games, and also where this mod got its title from. The main gameplay loop of this mod will now start, in which you solve puzzles. Yeah, this is the main discrepancy this fan game has from the real games. There is no combat system, no inventory and thus no enemies. There are a few situations in this game in which you actually have a chance to die, effectively making this game a walking simulator. The mod developers talk about this on the mod page. They say that they planned on including enemies and an inventory system, but sadly couldn't find anyone to do it. They clearly state that they don't apologize though, saying that they did all they could, and instead choose to proudly present the fact that this is Silent Hill without combat. A lot of the puzzles in this game were designed with the idea of being able to carry around notes. This falls away obviously. They note on the mod page that the player should take physical notes in real life while playing, something that will be crucial if you plan on solving any of the puzzles on your own. All of this being said, there are a ton of games that have a similar concept, focusing merely on puzzles and storytelling. So let's see how well this one fares. By the way, if you're still watching, consider subscribing for more videos like this one. The hospital has an incredible atmosphere, and it's clear that atmosphere is the one thing this mod greatly excels at. Even though there were no scares, this hospital had me on edge the entire time. The puzzles themselves mostly revolve around finding keys to open stuff, collecting clues for a password, and a ton of walking back and forth in between the many rooms that you have no chance of memorizing. Can't say the mod doesn't warn you beforehand, but this truly is a piece of brainwork. Most importantly story-wise, we get a mention of Dr. Kaufman, a prevalent character in the Silent Hill games. On one hand, we hear about the tests of White Claudia on a patient, causing hallucinations and paranoia. The patient acts aggressive, sees everyone as monsters. It also doubles the heart rate, thus it has been denied approval for further use. White Claudia may be familiar to Silent Hill fans. It's a herb growing in Silent Hill and is used to make PTV, a recreational drug used by mostly tourists in Silent Hill. It will continue playing an important role in this mod. We eventually have what is probably the scariest experience in this hospital, which is that we see a monster nurse eerily standing there. Nope. This is all that this encounter extends to though. After a ton of running back and forth, we eventually arrive in the toilet and see this symbol. This isn't the first time we see it in this game. These are found whenever the Order is around, the main cult of the Silent Hill games. And even more, it represents when rituals are being done in the area. In this game, interacting with them is the only way to save your progress, similar to Silent Hill 3, the non-PC version. I did notice the game sometimes doing autosaves on its own, but you will mostly be relying on these things. Alongside saving, they will always be accompanied with a line of thought the protagonist is experiencing when looking at them, mostly relating to the protagonist feeling pain in one form or another. When interacting with this specific one though, you get brought into the other world Alchemilla Hospital. It's mostly the same shtick, though this time the hospital is a lot more eerie to navigate around. You also see these disgusting creatures. I want to use this moment to recognize how incredibly well made all the models and materials of this mod are. Their mod page mentions how they made a ton of the characters themselves and edited textures. I don't have clear confirmation how many of these textures were made by the mod team or if they may not just be from a Silent Hill textures free download pack or whatever. But if they truly made most, if not all of these textures and models, huge shout out. Another great aspect is that we actually have a character model we can see in mirrors. Mirrors have existed ever since Half-Life 2. They went unused though, since Gordon doesn't have any model. And implementing a player model is a bit harder than one might think. This mod managed to do that however. and we look like a huge loser. Now, no offense to this guy, but damn does he look unemployed. The reoccurring theme of mirrors is not only decorational though. More on that later. We solve more puzzles in the other side hospital. This section lasts for quite a while, because most of the puzzles simply consist of finding stuff hidden through the many rooms. Unless you truly go and draw a map, you will have no overview of what place is where, especially once it starts spanning over multiple floors. If you were to know all the answers and where everything is placed perfectly, this mod will last a fifth as long as it will for the average player. My playthrough, for example, was about 4.5 hours. There are walkthroughs that are as short as an hour 30 though. There was one puzzle in particular that I may have just not understood because I'm dumb, but it involved 2 rotating poles with spikes on them on 3 out of 4 sides. You had to rotate both of them so that the non-spiky side pointed towards the path. That way you could pass. You had 2 valves to do this, both of which rotated both poles randomly from all I could tell. I must have missed something though, since after randomly rotating both for a solid 5 minutes, they randomly adjusted the way I needed them to. Very weird puzzle.
Oh, how did I do that? Okay, whatever.
Another puzzle in this section involves the theme of sin, where you have to sort 5 people by how much they've sinned. Most sinned to least sinned. There are 5 characters, all of which I assumed will play more important roles, but didn't. Finding all the messages will still lead to a kind of subjective understanding of how much everyone has sinned. Let's play a game.
Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to Most Sin to Least Sin. Introducing your gracious host, Lucia.
Welcome back to Most Sin to Least Sin. I'm gonna tell you everyone sins in a random order, and you make the call what you consider to be most sin to least sinned. First we have Ashley, who dropped a swab into the patient, giving the patient a 5 out of 10 chance to die, which is a weird way to say 50%, huh? We have Robert, who we know nothing about, other than that David is twice as much to blame as him. So we also have David now, who dared to be inebriated during operation. Can't you even have a little drink before driving to work anymore? I mean, is this what we call American? There's Joseph, whose only text we find is that he's an excellent surgeon who's not to blame. And the last one is Nancy, who neglected sterilization, causing the patient to die of septic shock. Forget the patient. You will be shocked to find out what order these belong in. So, what order would you put these in? I'll give you 0 seconds. It's Nancy first, followed by Ashley, followed by David, followed by Robert, followed by Joseph. Really, none of these make sense. While it's clear Nancy's on the higher end, we have no info on Robert. What if you murdered a family in cold blood and David is now twice as much to blame as him? Relative terms really don't help in this scale. Also, how is David below Ashley? Ashley dropped something during the operation, which sounds like a mistake. David, however, was on drugs while operating. Mistake versus negligence. How is this supposed to be clear in any way? So I thought this order was a bit weird. Any of them could have been lower or higher than they are. It's a mix of subjectivity and also just missing context. I personally ended up googling this puzzle in my playthrough. The theme of judgment continues, as the next puzzle involves us finding all the notes to correctly sort 4 cards. We arrive back in the normal hospital. The protagonist has a realization.
Something's wrong. Something is wrong. What's happening to me? The drugs? Dr. Kaufman. It's all his fault.
The game has already revealed the twist that this is all indeed in the head. We finally leave the hospital, though only after reading a note that gives us a clue to finding Dr. Kaufman. PTV gets directly mentioned here, that this drug will be sold to The Order, through the antique store Green Lion, a real location in the Silent Hill games once more. Getting there will take quite a bit though, even with our protagonist being clear on getting revenge. This is the first time we get to free roam in the town of Silent Hill. It's pulled off really well. There's an oddly calming vibe to it. It feels open, because it is. You can run in any direction. This is somewhat messy in terms of gameplay and guiding the player, but it is a refreshing feeling after just leaving the otherworld version of the hospital. The roads that lead to the Green Lion's antique shop are destroyed. Visiting a Chinese food place and general store in the name of solving a puzzle, both of which are visually very nicely designed, including parallax-corrected cube maps. We then enter the next main area, the Wilson Apartments, the only building that connects the streets that lead to the Green Lion shop. Gameplay-wise, this area is basically the same as the hospital. You run back and forth between multiple floors of this place solving random puzzles, some of which better than others. One of them I found particularly stupid though. There's a part in which you have to develop a photo to receive the next hint, for which you need to collect all the ingredients to do the developing. This is really creative and unique. One ingredient you need is a bottle of water. You first find the bottle and then need water. The tap doesn't work though. I remembered having seen pipes in the basement, and it turns out you can rotate 4 valves on different pipes. You need to turn the 2 small ones to the left and the 2 large ones to the right. How do I know this? A guide. How did the guide know this? No idea. The guide itself says that the game provides no clues for this from all I can tell. That's pretty insane. We learn a few more side stories of characters living in this place. Most of it isn't of much importance though. We find another mention of White Claudia and learn its backstory. That of Native Americans who use it for religious ceremonies, believing that the flowers had been granted by the gods as a means to call on them or connect with them via their souls. And that most importantly, that even though only shamans took them, everyone around felt that the gods and their souls were connected just the same, and that the reason for the mass hallucinations remain unknown. While this isn't relevant to this mod in particular, this adds a new backstory to this drug that was never explained in this great detail in Silent Hill canon before. We finally leave this building and make our way to Green Lion Antiques. To no surprise, we don't find anyone inside. The protagonist is rather slow in realizing that he's alone. This door is an almost perfect recreation of the time it's seen in Silent Hill Origins. Through a hole in the wall we enter the Green Lion Maze, where you find... oh god. The mannequins are the first time the game tries to properly scare you, perpetuating the classic mannequin stereotype that they always teleport behind you when you're not looking. There's also more story revelations here in the form of text on the walls. How far down does the rabbit hole go?
It's always easier to blame somebody else than yourself.
It's always easier to forget than to remember. The protagonist chimes in.
I remember having a family. We all got into a car accident and they're all gone now. I was driving the car at the moment and it's not my fault. I had a damn seizure while driving. All because of Dr. Kaufman's drug. He gave me the seizure. It's his fault. And his fault alone.
We pass a morgue, after which the hallways start distorting as we walk around the ceiling and walls. The Silent Hill town center is the next main area we enter. Another canon area only seen in the original Silent Hill. New areas were added, but everything seen in Silent Hill is respected here. There is not much to say about this area, other than that it's a mess gameplay-wise. We find the Yin and Yang book here. Aside from that, it's a ton of running back and forth between rooms you have no idea about. Something that also bugged me with the Wilson apartments is uncertain keys. Every single key you find has no markings or hint as to where it might fit. So if you're in an area surrounded by doors, say every area in this mod yet, you simply have to resort to pressing E on each door, which would not be a problem on, say, a regular Half-Life mod. But in this case, you will always be teleported to the next area accompanied by a 1-second black screen and another second to go back. This might not sound like a lot, but the fact that you have to do this many times with each key you find before you finally see the text, "the key fits," very quickly becomes annoying. There was one puzzle that I was baffled by how insane it is. You find a music box that plays 4 notes. Your goal is to remember this combination and then play it at a different music box at the completely other side of the map. It's like a 2-minute walk. How the hell are you supposed to do this? You couldn't even write this down if you wanted to, unless you happen to have perfect pitch. If the 2 boxes were at least closer to one another, one could kinda try and error it and find out 1 note at a time. But given that there are a total of 7 notes and 2 minutes of walking between these 2 boxes, I don't recommend anyone who isn't a music major to actually try this. Here's the correct combination. There's also a room filled with a ton of anime stuff. This seems to be a case of the developer wanting to show love to what they love. I always think it's cute when I see stuff like this in mods, however fitting it may be. Though in this case I don't think it's totally unfitting, albeit clearly intended to be an homage. In the same room do we hear the sirens again and transfer to the otherworld Silent Hill Town Center. It's simply a few more puzzles in a more uninviting environment, similar to the hospital. The final texts we find in this area are somewhat important. They read like a diary. I will skip a few unimportant bits. The colors have vanished from my world. This town has changed me. But in the end, I am guilty. I think you understand. You're the same. If the colors begin to vanish from your world too, then you must cling to reason. How did you get here? Have you sinned as well? If so, the town will not release you. Not until you understand your sin and yourself. Can you overcome the fury and remember? On the other hand, ignorance is bliss. Here I atoned for my sins and blood. You do not seem to realize what pain you've brought to the people around you, and even parts of your own soul. Come to think of yourself as a victim. Then you can remember and understand everything. In the soul is where the souls of victims were dumped, who would not acknowledge their sins. I paid for my sins with my life, but not here. Death is never more insignificant than when people atone. We jump down this exact hole and hear the protagonist comment on all these letters.
Is it really my fault? No. That's impossible.
We awake again in another part of the building, but only for a short while, as the alarm sounds once more, and we are transported back to the normal world.
I forgot something. Something important.
The protagonist mutters. The once oddly calming vibe these streets had is gone now, replaced by an oppressive noise, like you're stuck underwater. While supposedly you just escaped the other world, in reality it feels more like you've gone down into a place even deeper than that. The only path you can take leads you straight back to where it all started, your house. The vibes shift again. Nice ambient music is playing, you feel safe. All that is suddenly ripped away as the music cuts to a black screen. You see a vision of people buried in your garden. You catch glimpses of an axe laying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. Nothing of that can be found once you head downstairs though. Picking up a shovel and going to the garden, you confirm these visions to be true. The protagonist stutters.
But they died in the accident. Why are they here? What's going on?
The sirens sound once more. The protagonist goes on to blame Dr. Kaufman again, vowing to kill him, now in the other side version of her home. Mannequins seem to act out the brutal act committed on her kitchen. The entire town is now transferred into the other side version of itself, seemingly floating in an infinite void with the streets replaced by grates. We get ourselves into one of the only situations that allows for the player to be killed. A labyrinth is placed in front of us, and fire begins to chase behind us. A wrong turn will lead to your death. The correct path is marked by images of smiling mouths, whatever those may mean. Moving through a door, we transfer back to normal world, without any sirens. It's the lobby of the Alchemilla hospital, though this time all doors are locked except for the basement door, which is now just a super long staircase. We finally arrive at the section that is generally called The Truth. We find the diary of Lucia, a real character in Silent Hill. This letter is basically just meant for Silent Hill fans, as it adds a bit of character to Lucia without being relevant to this specific story. We then find 3 pieces of writing of Dr. Kaufman here, all of which relate to White Claudia and PTV. In addition to the ritual, I decided that White Claudia might be suited to recreational use. Using my contacts in the cult as an advantage, I began to successfully sell PTV, using an antique shop as a cover. My position as hospital director gives me great access to the necessary equipment for the production of the drugs, and I'm able to safely store them in a secret part of the hospital. The harm that drugs do makes me sick, but no one is forcing these stupid tourists to buy it. That idiot nurse Lisa will do whatever I tell her for her dose. Lisa was kept under control by Dr. Kaufman by him giving her an infinite supply of PTV. This is real Silent Hill lore. She isn't further relevant to this story though. The entire letter is essentially used to recap actual Silent Hill lore. The next pages, however, another funny story about a Norman Wexler. For months, I pumped him full of the drug. I had to see how much the body could take before death. It would certainly appear suspicious if residents and tourists started dying without explanation. But as it turned out, in this respect, the drug is safe. The same cannot be said for mental instability. Wexler became very aggressive, so much so that I decided to stop the experiments. But after a while, I accidentally found out that he had lost his family and the police are looking for him. I'll bet anything that Wexler's newfound insanity is connected to the drug. We are Norman Wexler. We are most likely the patient that was talked about in previous Alchemilla hospital documents. And given that we were pumped with PTV like Lisa was, it can be assumed that the nurse we saw at the beginning was Lisa, with the White Claudia essentially connecting us spiritually and having us both stuck in the same mental location in at least one plane of this drug-induced hell. This isn't much important, just a cool potential cameo for Silent Hill fans. The last letter reads, "Later, after a car accident, he ended up again in Alchemilla, and it looks like he's got some partial memory loss. I don't envy this idiot, but I've given him fair compensation for the experiment and warned him of all the risks involved." The protagonist chimes in.
I know. I was just scared. Afraid to face the truth. I tried to erase it from my memories, but it kept coming back and back and back again. It's all my fault. It has nothing to do with Dr. Kaufman. I was taking the drugs because I wanted it for myself. And I killed my family over it. I killed them. All this time I've been searching for Kaufman, but I've just been looking for the truth. And when I found it, my truth. My personal hell.
Given that Kaufman was the one that gave him the drugs and got him addicted in the first place, I'm unsure if Norman is truly solely to blame. I will get more to this later. For now, it's important to recognize that Norman sees only himself as guilty. We are now stuck in this exact personal hell. The final main area consists of a mix of every place we've visited before made up out of disgusting looking flesh. This area is Norman's guilt being spread across all his memories, manifested in a physical location. This location consists of a lot more puzzles and a lot more annoying doors across 3 floors. There are some clever elements, but I'm not here to summarize and spoil every puzzle. Right before leaving this place, we get put into a room with a huge mirror. We have the key for the exit, but for the first time ever, we have to interact about 10 times with the door before it actually manages to open. At one point, we even have to get a new key from the opposite side of the room, symbolizing that while Norman would rather just continue ignoring his guilt, he's now forced to face it. Face himself, which is what every mirror has been about, but this time we can't just look away. Once we finally leave, we are in a mysterious garage area, one that looks more like the normal world. However, once more, no alarms. Entering the car, water begins to flood the room. We remain in this car for a short moment before being transported back into our room. The protagonist whispers,
What the fuck?
Leaving our room, we are back in the hallway of guilt. This time it's flooded a lot more than previously. The protagonist utters his last words.
No one will save me. I'll just stay here.
The credits roll. This ending may have left many confused, but once you grasp the story as a whole, it will make a lot more sense. I will try and summarize it to my best knowledge now, and also put some analysis into it. It all began when Norman Wexler signed up to do testing for PTV, a drug later known to cause hallucinations, aggressiveness, and according to the law of the game, connected people spiritually, even those who didn't take it. Norman was warned of the risk by Dr. Kaufman, and the testing was stopped once Norman Wexler became insane, and he was compensated fairly. Norman Wexler then killed his family, drove off and got into a car accident. Norman Wexler, in his drug-induced insanity and forgetfulness, thought that his family died in the car accident. He believed his car crash to be caused by the drugs, forcefully given to him by Dr. Kaufman. Thus, he swore revenge. The content of the game all takes place in the head. It's about Norman realizing the fact that he is at fault, that it is him that killed his family. Yin and Yang references exactly what is going on inside Norman's psyche. Yin is internal struggles, whereas Yang is external turmoil. Yin and Yang in one body creates a situation of constant antagonism. The original writing actually says, a man and a woman's soul. But that's somewhat sexist. Yin in this case is Norman's psyche, attempting to accept that he is responsible for his family's death. Yang, however, wants to ignore these thoughts and instead shift the blame on Dr. Kaufman. Norman constantly fluctuates between accepting responsibility and denial, blaming Kaufman. This is realized in the game by the normal world and other side. His time in the normal world is usually spent hunting after Dr. Kaufman, while the other side is about him facing his guilt. And just like Yin and Yang, the reality is a balance of the two. While he did murder his family and has to accept his guilt, Yin, Dr. Kaufman was the one to give him these drugs and ultimately caused him to become insane. He may have been warned, but he couldn't have known that it would go to this extent. Thus, a certain blame is to be put on Dr. Kaufman. Yang. The dark twist is the end, when Norman is stuck in the chamber inside his mind that is made up out of only guilt, a flesh prison. He goes back to the normal world for a short moment, but only to get in his car and suffocate. It's unclear as to exactly what this means. We are not sure of Norman's real whereabouts in the story. Presumably it's a hospital, but he may also be in his crashed car, perhaps burning to death, with his multiple hour-long dream taking place in a few real-life minutes. What it mostly seems to symbolize is that he can accept a balanced reality, one where there is blame to be put on him, but where he's allowed to try and move on, maybe overcoming the PVT-induced insanity, one where Dr. Kaufman is at least partially to blame. He instead drowns in his guilt, which the water symbolizes. He makes one final attempt to ignore it as he envisions his room, but this vision no longer holds up. He was able to move around his house before, but now leaving his room, he finds himself stuck in his own personal mental prison surrounded by his guilt. Nobody will save him. He would just stay here, and wherever he may be in real life right now, dying, in prison, in the hospital, hiding from the police, which may explain the siren sounds, his mind is only thinking of one thing, guilt, and he will never escape it. That's my attempt at interpreting this story. I would like to see your attempts in the comments because, as it is with art, there's no right way to see something. Finally, let's get into my review of the game itself in terms of gameplay. While I do like puzzles, I feel that oftentimes it got rather annoying, especially when you had to navigate back and forth between huge areas. If the game managed to implement a map system like it originally intended to, that would have solved a bunch of problems. Also the inventory system in which you carry notes with you. I have to be fair in that the mod does at least warn you that this is the case. Sadly, this doesn't really mean anything when it comes to the finished product. Nobody will be able to memorize notes unless they have perfect pitch. If we got to take the music box with us in the inventory in that one puzzle, that would have made it actually completable. I don't mind missing combat that much. That being said, I would love to see the mod getting a remake that does feature weapons, items, a map and enemies. I get that finding modders with these talents is hard though. The looks are great, and so is the atmosphere. But it can only do so much when there's no real threat, and no attempt of scaring you even once. The mannequins did something, but not enough. Once you realize there's no threat, it turns into a walking simulator. Neither is the atmosphere enough to carry the whole mod's supposed horror element, causing it to fade halfway through the story. Even I, as an absolute scaredy cat, was sprinting through the hallways later on. A few more sightings of the nurse could have really increased this mod's scariness, and thus have the player more on edge, even if the nurse doesn't end up doing anything. She really did a great amount in increasing the horror of the Alchemilla hospital at first. I really enjoy the story, especially in analysis afterwards. And it's definitely part of the gameplay experience. I especially like that it seamlessly adds a new character to Silent Hill canon, that being the person PTV was first tested on, Norman Wexler. I also like the protagonist being clueless as to what's going on and finding out alongside the player. The story itself seems a little on the nose later on, as the protagonist seems to explain what happened, but the stuff explained really is only the surface level, at least in the way I interpret the story. As a package, this game felt a bit more like a chore to get through for me. While I am glad that I did play it in hindsight, I personally couldn't get much enjoyment out of it in the moment. I recommend it to everyone that loves puzzles in a horror atmosphere. If that doesn't sound like your thing, I recommend skipping this mod, and potentially waiting for a remake that features combat, which is not confirmed in any way, obviously. Just my personal wish. Remember to like and subscribe and to join the Discord, and go over to the second channel to watch my blind playthrough of this mod. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Oh no, I don't like the fact that somebody's in this building.
Hey.
Don't talk to her.